This is the King's Court on Arena Sportsnet, presented by American Grappler.
I got more swagger than Mick Jagger, more sex appeal than Vince Neil.
All guests from all walks of life share their time with the King of Connecticut.
They are dreaming of just one night with a man such as myself.
Any and everything goes.
I am the King of Connecticut. I was raised with class and sophistication.
And now, from Norwalk, Connecticut, weighing in at 230 pounds, if George Clooney had muscles, they'd call him the King of Connecticut. The one, the only, Matt Granahan. And go.
It is the pernicious purveyor of preposterous pomposity, manipulating the minuscule mind of the masses of miscreants. I am your host, the King of Connecticut, Matt Granahan, and I've got a great guest today, but before I introduce her, I want to kind of clarify something. I was talking on social media about Robert De Niro, and he made some inflammatory comments about Donald Trump. And I made a comment about Robert De Niro's acting, and I want to kind of clarify what I meant by that. When I said that Robert De Niro has been typecast and that he has read lines throughout most of his career, I didn't mean a great deal of disrespect, because there's been a number of actors that have been typecast over the years. Dennis Farina, one of my favorite actors, that has been typecast over the years as well. But what I meant by that was, if you go back to Godfather 2, and some of y'all are probably too young to remember Godfather 2, he literally immersed himself in the island of Sicily, where my mother's family's from, and he learned the Sicilian dialect. And after that, he was typecast, whether he was a cop, whether he was a gangster, whether he was a boxer, whether he was a father. You look at all those roles, he was typecast, and he was reading a lot of the same lines. And I contrasted that to Billy Bob Thornton. Now, Billy Bob Thornton, in my opinion, is the epitome of an actor. And if you look at the definition of the word actor, look at Sling Blade, look at Mr. Woodcock. You can't tell the difference between those two. Those two characters, in other words, have such a great difference that you can't even tell it's the same guy who's starring in both movies. Because to me, a great actor is someone that makes you suspend reality, makes you believe you are that person, someone who steps into a role. And that was what I meant by my criticism of De Niro. And when I criticized De Niro and said that Donald Trump could kick his ass, you know, I think I stand on pretty good ground on that, considering I've been in combat sports my entire life as a competitor and as a coach. And I look at two guys, neither of which really has any fighting skills. And I look at one guy who's more than half a foot taller and more than 60 pounds heavier than the other, that could probably knock the other guy down with ease. So that was all I was saying. Now it is on to my guest tonight. And my guest tonight, and let me talk about this young lady, I want to say respectfully, you know, because as a man myself in my 40s, this was a young lady that I always had an enormous crush on. I was always a sucker for a British accent, and there were two young ladies growing up watching professional wrestling that I had an enormous crush on. This young lady was the more beautiful of the two, Jeanie Clarke, and the other one was in Glow was Lady Godiva. And Jeanie Clarke has the real deal British accent. And Jeanie was one of the first valets, as I understand, in England, going all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s. And that's why I want to bring her in. And that was in World of Sport. And that was a more technical style professional wrestling presentation that starred guys like Billy Robinson. And most people listening to this show know who Billy Robinson is. So I want to welcome to the show Jeanie Clarke. How you doing tonight, Jeanie?
Hi, I'm doing good, thank you. Got a little bit of a cold, so excuse my voice just a little bit because I've been having a little bit of a cough and cold going on. But I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, you sound amazing. You sound great. And you started in professional wrestling back in your native UK. How in the world did you get involved in the wild and wacky world of professional wrestling?
Well, it was actually completely by accident. Me and my friends, we used to go to a lot of concerts, and one of my friends had a father who was a huge wrestling fan. The only exposure I really had to wrestling was when I went to her house. He would have it on TV every Saturday afternoon because it was a really, really popular show. And he would go to the matches all the time, but one day he got really ill, and he had these 2 tickets, and my friend wanted to go, and she sort of dragged me along. And that very first night that I went along, I met Chris Adams, and we started dating, but I had no previous experience going to wrestling matches or anything like that. But not long after Chris and I was dating, I started running his fan club, and then he came up with this idea that, because in the UK, you guys would know this, they used to call girls, or well, they're not really girls because I was the only girl, but it was like boxing rules where it would be a second, like they do in boxing, where the person comes into the ring and
like you'd say like a second or a corner, like a corner man or woman.
Yeah. And there wasn't all this interference like in the States. So it was just like a little novelty attraction of a girl getting into the ring, and they would wolf whistle because they were like really quiet, the fans, compared to the American
and that's where UK and Japan are somewhat similar. Japan's changed, and I'm sure UK has as well. But in Japan, it used to be wrestling in Japan, you could almost hear a pin drop, and they would literally clap, almost like a golf clap.
Yeah, they clap. It's very, very similar. And, they'd have the odd wolf whistle, but they didn't really have me involved in the matches like with hairspray or brass nuts or anything like that. So it was just my job to get in, and it was a little bit of a novelty. It got a lot of press from the local papers because it hadn't really been seen before. I know Adrian Street had Miss Linda. She had a similar kind of thing going on, but I was actually the first, apparently, female second, and quite a lot of the tabloids in the UK kind of glamorized Chris and I because, we were the only ones doing it. And they had a really young Dynamite Kid working then, Tom Billington and Davey Boy Smith. He was about 19. We were all about 19. And Mark Rocco, people like that, was going back to about 1978. And I got to travel the whole of the UK to all the arenas. And that was sort of by accident, because I'd gone to a wrestling match with my friend, and Chris Adams approached me, and I thought he was real cute, and he invited me to go to a motor show up in Birmingham, and then we started dating, but I had not been smart to the business or anything, and then he had come up with this idea of this second, so that's how that happened.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And you mentioned some big names there. You mentioned, Tom Billington, Davey Boy Smith, and you mentioned Adrian Street. And man,
Adrian Street could get some heat. I mean, if you go back in time and you go back to, my background, I was trained by Billy Wicks, for years, who came out of the car, and he's a big star in Memphis. And he used to tell me about Ricky Starr. And he used to tell me about ways to get heat by having that, by being a really good wrestler, legit, but also having that effeminate side that really pissed off the fans.
Yeah.
And Ricky Starr was the first guy. Yeah, Ricky Starr was the first guy to do that, and Adrian Street followed suit with that.
Uh-huh. But that shows you how long ago it was.
Yeah, well, Adrian Street was awesome. I mean, you look at awesome, I went back to Ricky Starr. You could go back to Gorgeous George. Those guys that had that and he had the same thing with the second. But you have that kind of effeminate type character that gets the heat. But Adrian Street is someone that a lot of people forget, and somebody like a Goldust. Or Johnny B. Bad, when you were in WCW, those characters were offshoots of a Ricky Starr or Adrian Street.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so you're there in England, and you're working with a gentleman, Chris Adams. And how many years were you there on the wrestling scene in the UK?
Not too long, I think about a year. There was a Japanese wrestler, I don't know if you remember him, Yasu Fuji. He is also into martial arts. He came over to England and he did a few matches with Chris. He told Chris about Gene LaBelle and Mike LaBelle.
Are you talking about Fujiwara?
I thought his name was Yasu Fuji. Am I incorrect?
Yasuhiko Fujiwara. Yeah, he was actually a big star
he was
a big star in UWFI. Yeah. Yep, and Fujiwara is a legend. He was trained by Carl Gotch. Yeah,
well, he came to the UK and did a full run there, and so he is being martial arts background like Chris, because Chris was in the British judo team. He was really
absolutely.
good. Obviously, he was a little bit in the shadow though of his brother Neil Adams, who won 2 silver medals at judo in the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
He was, a massive judo person. So Chris was never quite as good as Neil, and they had a great relationship. But Chris thought he would branch off into wrestling. But he was called Judo Chris Adams and Black Belt Chris Adams.
Kind of like Judo Gene LaBelle. And that was one of the things I told you, when you came to the United States, you worked for Gene's brother, for Mike LaBelle. And God, Gene LaBelle is a mentor of mine. I mean, I really, when I wrote the Rough and Tumble book, Gene LaBelle and Billy Wicks wrote the 2 forwards. And Gene was always known as Judo Gene LaBelle. So Chris Adams would have been a natural. And I actually talked to Gene about Chris and his brother.
Yeah. So that was kind of what got the foot in the door for us to come to the States, was that they were all judo guys. So they were willing to give Chris a job in it was out of Los Angeles at the Olympic Auditorium. They used to have the event there.
Yep, so, and that was Eileen.
It was the Rock's granddad.
The Rock's grandfather got started there. Oh yeah, and Mike and Gene's dad was Eileen Eaton, and Eileen Eaton's husband used to run that territory, and Eileen was a secretary. And I've heard these stories so many times, from Gene over the years. And that was how Gene got into pro wrestling and pro wrestling competing and pro wrestling broadcasting.
Okay.
And then his brother Mike went on the side of being the promoter, and Mike was the predecessor to or the whatever you'd say, the one that was the next in line after Eileen and her husband died.
Okay, because when we got there, it was the tail end of the promotion. It was about 1980.
Yep.
1980, 81.
Did you ever deal with Mike LaBelle?
Well, I just remember I didn't personally. I just remember, he was the one that hired Chris, and I met him to say hi, and that was it, really.
But he was kind of like, he was the one who ran the promotion, was Mike LaBelle.
Yeah, he's the one, and, when we first got there, Chris wasn't really making that much money. It was about $40, I think, and he didn't have that many spot shows. I think a few spot shows came after in San Bernardino, I think was one, but we were very poor. We both, had very, very little money, so I had to get a couple jobs, which was fine, to support us, and then Chris ended up going to Mexico for 6 months, and then on to Portland. But when we first got to the States, we were based in LA, and we loved it because we were young, and even though we had to sleep on the beach a little bit until I got to making some money, it was just such a contrast because we were traveling around England, and then, hey, we are now on the beach of Santa Monica, and we were just young, and it was just like, wow, can you believe it? So we loved it. We were poor, but we loved it, and it was just a great.
Oh yeah, there's nothing better. You're coming from England, which you could kind of equate to like a Seattle, where it's rain a lot and it's colder.
Yes.
London, and you're on the beach, and you're on the beach in Los Angeles. You can't
nice
beat that.
Weather. Yeah, all the girls in their bikinis. I'm sure Chris loved that.
And I'm sure I'm sure he did, but I'm sure you caught the eye of many men in your bikini.
Well, I got a job on Santa Monica Pier at a restaurant called Moby's Dock. I can remember it well. And I would stand outside trying to bring people in, but I loved it. I didn't. And then I did some modeling because it was cash in hand. Bearing in mind, I didn't have a green card, so these jobs were cash in hand at that time. And then I started. I got an agent, and I was modeling about 5 days a week, and we managed to get an apartment. But first we were staying in a place that a lot of wrestlers stayed called the Flamingo West Motel on Ocean Avenue. And Tom Pritchard was the one that I can remember the most as coming over and Chris traveling with. And, so then I started making quite a bit of money, and we had a bit more comfortable life.
That's awesome. So you're there in LA. And when you got to the States, how long were you in LA for before you moved to? Did you go to Dallas next after that? Is WCCW?
No. What happened was I became pregnant with my first child, Jade. Chris is the father of. Steve is adopted, but Chris is the father of. And she was born in 81. And by 81, I believe the whole, the NWA there had shut down.
Mm-hmm.
If I can remember rightly, and I hope I'm right, but it might have been 82. So Chris had gone on to Mexico. I had gone down to Mexico a couple of 3 times, but I was quite heavily pregnant, and I needed to be around the doctors and stuff, so I ended up staying in Redondo Beach with a friend that I'd met in LA, and I went on back to England to have the baby because we didn't have any insurance of any kind back then or a lot of money, and and obviously England is socialised medicine, so I came back and also had the support of Chris's parents. Then what happened is we went back to LA for a little while, and then he got picked up by Portland. So we drove up from Los Angeles up through San Francisco to Portland, where we actually split up after a while, because I think what it is to be honest, is Chris was a really good-looking guy, and we had a great relationship, and we did up until he died. But for a little while there, it was a bit mad in Portland. There's a lot of groupies of arena girls.
Ring rats,
it was a wild territory. There were a lot of, the starting of drugs and stuff. And I think, Chris came in and all the girls scream.
They're all swooming for me. The gentleman, Chris Adams, no doubt about it. Now, Jeanie, that was a large part of his gimmick too.
Well, yeah, but he started acting on it, and
he was living the gimmick like many do.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he was 24, 25 years old, and I'm sure the temptation was there, but basically, in LA, I was working before, and I had the beach and I could walk about. But when we got to Portland, I was in a very small apartment. Tommy Rogers lived next door, but I didn't drive. And I had a baby.
Who did you work for in Portland? Was it Don Owen?
Yes.
Yeah, which is notorious for not paying well, right?
Yeah, we had like a studio apartment, a really grimy studio, but it didn't have like a connection of any public transport, and I didn't drive, and I had a baby, and basically Chris started going out and staying out, and I sort of let him off a couple of times, and was all, I'm sorry, and I think, after it just kept going on, I felt really humiliated, because I would go to the arenas with the baby, and all the girls would have slept with him. Do you know what I mean? So it was
absolutely. No, absolutely understand. And for him, and God, for him, he's early, to mid 20s. You are a drop dead gorgeous woman. But the temptation is still
got
strong.
Crushed there. Yeah, but my confidence and self-esteem had really gone down, and what had happened was actually I had to come back to England for a funeral, and I left Jade with Chris not for long. I just come for the funeral, and I come back, and all these girls kept calling, and I could tell that he did cheat. I mean, it's just the way it is. So
well, I'll tell you a little personal story, Jeanie. When I was in that age, and my daughter was born when I was 27, and when she was young, I was running on premise for a bar for a beer and wine distributor. So I had all the girls working for me, was working late at night, and that was before the cell phones. So when I came home one night, she had been drinking, and she had the old fireplace poker out, swinging it ready to kill me. That's the kind of attitude you get, right? You get right because you got a young kid at home.
I didn't even have that attitude. Mine was just sadness. I didn't really fight with him. I just kind of didn't feel, I just didn't think he was going to stop. And he said, I'm sorry. So what happened when I came back from England, Billy Jack Haynes, who was, working that territory, he said to me, he was upset with Chris Adams for messing around, and apparently...
Jeanie, I think maybe he was swooping in and trying to grab you.
Well, but I was young and I didn't know that at the time, but looking back, I'm assuming that's true. And, and I had a lot of modeling pictures and stuff, and I think what it was is he said to me, Chris, why do you cheat on Jeanie? And apparently Chris told Billy, well, it's a little bit like having steak every night. Every once in a while you'd like a piece of chicken. And I was like, oh my God, he said that. Oh, right. And then
Billy Jack Haynes told you that Chris had said that. Wow, that's
yes.
He's definitely one of those guys, and there's a lot of guys like that they swoop in. They see that problem.
Well, and he said I'd be happy. If it was me, I'd be happy with the steak. Bear in mind, I was 23. I was quite naive.
That's a great
line.
And I
thought, oh my God, and there was this girl called Amanda. I can't remember her name because it was such a big deal.
Yeah.
And then Billy told me that the day before I came back from England, he was like, don't be calling here or coming over. Apparently she was staying in the apartment, and I would get these phone calls. And in the end, I decided I wanted to leave Chris because, you know, he not only sort of like if he left the house, he would say, "I'll see you at midnight," and he might not come home for 2 days. And we didn't have the mobile phones back then, but I would just be sitting there crying, and I just did it for a long time. And in the end, Billy said, "Well, I'll marry you so you can get a green card." And whatever, you know, the survival instinct or whatever it was, I said okay, and I left Chris. But it took a long time of hoping he would change and giving up that he would change. And so I actually married Billy Jack. But we didn't have.
I had no idea you were married to Billy Jack Haynes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I've written all this in my new autobiography all about that.
Yeah, because I missed it because I knew you were with him. I didn't realize that you had actually. How long did that marriage last?
Well, it didn't really last because I don't think we had enough love. I think Billy had an infatuation, but I thought he was just a friend trying to help me out. But I think looking back, you know, he was, you know, infatuated. But I just thought, what a nice guy who's trying to... And bear in mind, I had no family, no friends, because we'd just come up there, and no support. And Chris wasn't... So I really had no options. I couldn't even fly back to the UK because I didn't have the money for the flight. So we weren't, you know, by any means having any spare cash either. And any spare cash we did have, Chris was spending it on drugs and alcohol at that point. So I was getting resentment because I didn't even have money to buy.
Now, you know, I want to ask you. I want to ask you this because you brought that up. You mentioned spending on drugs and alcohol because when I think of gentleman Chris Adams, you know, and some of y'all listening might be too young to know this, but I associate him with Gino Hernandez. And Gino Hernandez, I think, and I want to ask you this too, I don't want to jump ahead, but let me just ask you this. Was Chris addicted to cocaine? Was he doing a lot of cocaine? I mean, because this was the 80s.
No. He was never an addict to cocaine. He liked smoking weed and drinking alcohol, but he was never like Gino. You know, I was probably the last person to see Gino alive.
You were Gino Hernandez's neighbor.
I lived right next door to him, and I won't go into all the details, but I do write in my books and the stuff that happened between the you know, Gino dying and his cocaine, and I remember
that's been, you know, and Jeanie, that's something that I read in the book because you were literally his neighbor, and that's been one of the most talked about things because one guy that I always really loved watching was Gary Hart, and he was saying that he felt like Gino Hernandez they had laced cocaine, like he had gotten hold of some bad cocaine, and that the dealers had killed him, you know, and that he didn't. It wasn't like a legitimate, you know, overdose. What do you think happened with Gino Hernandez?
Well, 1 week before he died, exactly 1 week before he died, I had gone out with Gino to a club it was quite exclusive club. When we came back from the club, he opened like the cupboard in his kitchen, and out of the top of the cupboard he pulled out a cereal bowl, which was just high with cocaine. It must have been several.
It was like a sugar bowl, but it was full of coke.
Yeah, it was massive amounts, and he was making these massive lines, and he got really paranoid, and he pulled a gun out, and he held me around my waist and my shoulders, and I kind of like start holding on to the fridge because there was a fridge, and I was holding on to it, and And he said, do not move. Shh, be quiet and don't say anything. And, of course, I wasn't going to because he had a loaded gun in his hand, not pointing at me. But he turned on the taps and put the plug in the sink, and all the water was just coming onto the floor. So all this water was flooding into the kitchen, and I'm holding and I'm trying to turn the taps off and pull the plug out, and he's, no, you don't move. And about 15 minutes he was like thinking someone was outside. You know, he was, shh, did you hear that? Did you hear that? And I think he just was paranoid. But I think, you know, after an hour, he kind of settled down out of that. And I saw him the next day, and he's like, oh my God, you must think I'm a moron. But I saw him do massive amounts of cocaine. That was a week before. And then I saw him go out the night he died. And he drove a Porsche. And because I lived next door...
You said something that he bought a pie or something?
Yes. The day he died, he bought a pie because he used to call me kiddo. And I was up at Chris's apartment because I had the key to Chris's apartment. Because Chris and I made friends again. And I saw him over the balcony of Chris's apartment. And he goes, come on over for some pie in the morning. So the pie was on the table, and I saw his car come back, and the wheels were kind of turned funny. It's like he'd been driving and hadn't parked up properly. And then I knocked on his door that morning, and there was nobody answering. And I was thinking, okay, he's crashed out, because I knew he'd been out, and I knew he'd probably using his cocaine. And the pie was still on the table, untouched. And then I said to my friend Vicky upstairs, and then I hope he's okay. I'm just too scared to call anybody in case he's going to get arrested, you know, for having cocaine. And it was difficult because I didn't know what to do, because Chris had gone to England, because that's when they did that blinding angle. And, you know, I just saw it, but I knew he'd come home about 2 a.m., and then the next thing is they're bringing his body out of there. But I don't know. I didn't hear or see anything suspicious of anybody, you know. I think, personally, I think he did.
Yeah, I mean,
I saw how much he was using.
Yeah, because he was using large amounts of cocaine. But the what some folks have said that might have been laced because he owed money for a variety of things. There's been all kinds. No one's ever going to know. And let's be honest about it. No one's ever going to know.
To be honest, you know, there were some guys that came over that got in. I think it was David Manning, but there were some guys that took over from him from Houston.
Yeah.
That were a bit
David Manning, the referee.
Well, he came over when the body was out, but then there were guys going into his apartment after that from Houston.
Yeah,
but I don't know who they were.
It's going to be one of those. It's going to be one of those mysteries. Nobody's going to know. But beyond that, and we're jumping ahead a little bit to World Class Championship Wrestling. But beyond that, when you got to World Class Championship Wrestling, could you have ever thought there would have been so many tragedies? I mean, what are your memories of the Von Erichs? I know your story about Chris Von Erich is very sad, but what are your memories of that family and of their patriarch, of Fritz?
Well, I actually never met Fritz, and don't forget, I didn't come into World Class until 1990 with Jerry Jarrett. I was living in Dallas in 86 when Gino died, because he was going to be the first choice for the angle, the ex-wife angle, that Chris had wanted to do, and it was going to be paired up with Gino originally. And then I sort of went off and I moved out of the apartment next door to Gino because it was dark living there after that. You know, it was sad. So I just decided to move on, and I actually started my own business doing novelty telegrams, and I had 10 employees. So I didn't see many of the Von Erichs because I saw Kevin occasionally and Kerry outside of this auditorium. So when I started the Angle was after Chris started his wrestling school and obviously had Steve as his student. And by then,
and I've got some stories. I've got some stories to tell about that because one of our guests this season is a guy that I've wrestled, worked a number of matches with that came into the school with Steve Austin and Chris Adams was Chuck Sloan, and he was talking about how Stone Cold, the man who was later known as Stone Cold or Steve Williams at the time, was Chris Adams' star student back then.
Yeah, definitely. And I can remember Chris starting the wrestling school, and and I saw his commercials on the TV, and he was like, he had a lot of people show up that were never going to make it, and he'd stretch them a bit, or he'd laugh, and I always thought, oh God, he's mean. He didn't teach him anything, but he said to me, but there's one guy I think's got potential. He's a football player, and he looks like a wrestler, Steve Williams. And he said, and I want to try this Angle again, because don't forget, Gina was the first choice, and he died. So he said, we're going to have a go. Will you be up for it? Now, even though I had 10 employees and I was working in my telegram business, the tapings was just a Friday night in Dallas, where I lived, and Saturday morning, so I could delegate, the shows that I would do on a Friday. And so it was fun. Just a fun, little break it was just like a little bit of going in on a Friday night and taking me half an hour to get there and half an hour to get home. So it was really easy for me and fun. And Steve was really humble, nice guy, and we started that Angle, which got a lot of heat, really. Yeah, it was good. Good days.
Yeah,
Happy
absolutely it did.
I loved it at the Sportatorium because the fans were diehard fans, and it just had an electric atmosphere in there, and it was so much fun going in there.
Yeah, so the Sportatorium didn't last for too many years after that.
Well, when I went in, Chris's plans was to make this Angle last a year, and it was very soap opera, and he had all these different ideas, and we just showed up there, and the next thing it was all over. Steve went on to Memphis.
Explain it a little more for people that might not know, because I think everybody remembers you with Stone Cold or with Steve Austin in WCW, but explain that Angle.
Well, before there was a similar kind of thing with Precious and Sunshine and Jimmy Garvin.
Yep.
I think Missy Hyatt might have been there then. But it was, Chris was trying to recreate like two girls. Obviously, we weren't wrestlers, Tony and I. We didn't have a clue. But it was more of a personal, sort of had an element of reality, because I really was his ex. I was never his ex-wife. That was, the Jeanie Adams was just part of the Angle. Chris and I dated and were boyfriend and girlfriend for about 5 years, but
and you had a child together.
And we had a child. Yeah. And the feud. He said to me, "You could come in as the evil ex-wife and go out and watch a Dynasty, because I want you to be a little bit like Joan Collins, power dress, and be just, you know, kind of that bitchy, sort of rich, kind of snobby. And Chris would tease me all the time.
I can't even tell you how attracted I was to you when I first saw you on TV.
Really, thank you.
Absolutely.
That was fun back then.
Yeah, so go on. What happened from there?
We didn't bring Tony in for about 3 months because Chris wanted to build up, you know, all this heat on me. So when she came in, it would really mean something. And Steve and I would go out and we'd give these interviews, and they would be starting bitch, slut, whore, you know, at me, and they'd chuck cokes, and that was a compliment actually, because you know that's what we wanted to achieve. And then I would interfere, and then suddenly Tony would come in and finally get me, and the crowd went mad. We ended up having, you know, some cat fights, as you call it that, and then, you know, just out of the blue, just arrived and it was all over. There was no notice that the Angle or the USWA was going to fold. It just happened. It was one of those promotions. You know, USWA was one that Lawler was a champion of. Because the Jarrett and Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee would come in on a coach from Memphis, and then sometimes we would go to Memphis and do their tapings on the tour bus. So it was like the offshoot or, you know, grandchild of Memphis wrestling. You know, going back to Jerry Jarrett and then before Jerry Jarrett. And that's funny because I just talked to Jeff Jarrett today because I'm working with a local radio station with Intercom and the Rise Guys Morning Show. We're doing a Global Force show here in the Carolinas. It's going to be at the I remember Jeff. Excuse me. Yeah, I remember Jeff coming in. Jeff.
You remember Jeff. You remember Jeff when he was young. This is way before, you know, Jeff went in, had a long career, WCW, WWF, TNA, you know. But this was the early days. So, what were your impressions of Jeff back then?
I really, really liked Jeff, and I got along really well with him, and he helped me out. I did a few little he did some run-ins, and I always thought he was a very, very nice person. Yeah. I went out for dinner with him once, not only as friends, but I just thought he was a real classy guy. I liked him a lot.
Yeah, and he's a very straightforward businessman. He's a very, you know, direct guy and you know, a great guy. So we're talking about your angle with Steve Austin. How did you and Steve start dating, and how did it blossom from there?
Well, you know, our first meeting wasn't very good because I remember I got to the Sportatorium to start the Angle, and Tony greeted me, and she said, "I'll introduce you to Steve." And I remember to, "Hey, how are you?" And he was like, "Yeah, hey." Like that, and he turned around and he walked up to the Crow's Nest, which is in the Sportatorium where they would sit. And I remember saying to Tony, I don't think he's too happy about having a girl with him, or you know, working in an Angle. Perhaps he just wants to be, because I didn't think he seemed too happy. But after we got started, we would have small talk, and he had a girlfriend, Cassie was her name, and I would often just, "How are you?" and how's your girlfriend and stuff like that. And we were just friends.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Jeanie, what it probably was is, I mean, you're a tremendously gorgeous woman, and he probably felt like if he gave too much attention, he was going to have problems with the girlfriend.
I think so. I think you're right. Yeah, and you know, but I had no attraction to him then, but I've liked him as a friend. And we just grew up, starting to do our interviews. We'd have a real laugh, and we started to warm up to each other. And what happened was Chris, he had his own little promotions, spot shows, called L&A Promotions he did with a guy called Tom Lance. And so he would hire us to do these little spot shows. And one day, one of the shows, I believe it was Louisiana, and I said to Chris, oh man, I ain't got a clue how to drive out there. And he said, that's okay. He said, call up Bronco Rivik, she was driving there, and you can hook up with him. And the thing is Steve was also hooked up with him. So what happened was we all, and I think it was another guy too, Gary Young, I think, and we all drove together to save on petrol, obviously, and or gasoline. And we
petrol. That's so. You're adorable. I love that petrol.
Gasoline. So well, on that trip, we all had dinner together and stuff because we were like a little team there. And I kind of sort of noticed Steve's attraction towards me at that time. And I'd already warmed up to him as well. And, we had such a laugh because Steve and I had...
At this time, to set the stage, because everybody knows Stone Cold Steve Austin, but at this time, he had the long flowing blonde locks, right?
Yeah, and he was quite shy and quite humble guy. And, and sitting at dinner, I noticed he's sitting a bit closer, but I could, obviously you can tell when somebody is attracted to you. So we had dinner. You can't blame him. I would think he was insane if he wasn't attracted to you. Well, we've been working together for several months now, so we've become, good friends. And he started to send me these little cards. I put some of these in my book, these love letters and stuff like that. So I knew he really, really liked me. And I was really flattered because he would give me little gifts and these little cards. He'd hide them all around my house. And if I say I went to the bathroom to the cupboard to get a towel, oh man, he left me a note. I thought it was so adorable. What a helpless romantic Stone Cold Steve Austin is. We're exposing some big stuff here on the show that folks might know. Just a helpless romantic. He was very, very cute. Yeah. Now, something that I think a lot of people don't understand, and I want to kind of clarify, is Stone Cold and Chris Adams didn't always have, the best relationship. But I don't think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any of that had to do with you. No. Basically, there was another guy who, along with Chris, did the independent spot shows. And I can't remember his name. I think it was Ed somebody. And basically asked Steve to do one of these spot shows and gave him a guarantee of $100, which was a fortune to Steve because Steve, didn't have any money at all back then. Excuse me, I got a bit of a cough. And Chris had a show on the exact same day. So Chris was like, oh my God, you can't do that show, and I'll give you $100 and match it. So Steve did not want to let the other guy down because Steve's quite reliable like that. And he did end up saying to Chris, because Chris was, going on and on, he needs to be at his show. And what happened was, make a long story short, is Chris only gave him $40 or something, and he goes, hey, where's my other $60? And Chris was like, who do you think you're talking to, and all of this. And basically Chris didn't keep his end of the bargain, and that made Steve have a bad grudge towards him. So that's where all the heat comes from. It has nothing to do with women, and it has nothing to do with you, and it has nothing to do with Tony, really.
It has everything. It has everything to do with this. And that's something people don't understand, because people are going to look for a sensational answer, and that's not the most. That's not the most sensational answer.
No, that's what happened. Is and in fact today, if you go back then, that could have bought him his gasoline and his food. I mean, he starved. He lost weight. He says.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Book,
were you with him? Were you with him during that time period?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I remember his stories about saying only eating potatoes.
That's right. And I would offer to buy, because I had my own company. I would offer to buy him Chinese takeaways and all of that, which I did, because he literally couldn't afford them. And I even paid for his boots, his first pair of boots, because
something else you did. You paid for his first pair of boots, but something else you did, and I want to bring this up because I've confirmed this is true. You created the name Stone Cold.
Yeah, that I did, yeah.
So
that was
talk about that,
on, by the way.
How did that happen?
Well,
we're jumping way ahead. We're jumping way ahead, but we'll go back to the WCW.
Okay. Yeah. When he did get to work for Vince, they had him as a ringmaster with Ted DiBiase talking for him, and Steve's the type of person that really doesn't like managers -- anyone talking for him. He likes to be on his own, and he had an idea that he just wanted to wear plain black trunks, and he thought we were flicking through some channels watching a show about a killer guy who was called the Iceman, and Steve said that's exactly what the character that I want to be. And the Iceman was taken by Iceman King Parsons.
King Parsons, yeah.
So he phoned Vince, and the office starts faxing over these temperature-based names. They were all really hokey, as you know, like the Fang McFrost and Ice Dagger, causing hysterics between Steve and Brian Pillman would be on the speakerphone, and they'd be in hysterics reading these names out. But Steve's still pondering on this, and I come from England, so I drink hot tea, and he's, Steve, stop worrying about it. Just drink your tea before it gets stone cold. And well, there you go, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that's exactly how it happened.
I love that, because I'm going to say where I thought that came from, and it kind of dates me as an old fart, but I'm going to say it anyway. I always thought Stone Cold came from Brian Bosworth's movie, Stone Cold. Remember back in the 80s?
No, I didn't know they had that.
Yeah, because it was like, because the Boz was supposed to be like a big football star, coming out of Oklahoma, and then he kind of fizzled in the NFL, and he had one hit movie, which was called Stone Cold. And I always thought that's what that came from, was Stone Cold, was the movie. No,
it was that documentary on the guy called the Iceman, and Steve said he liked his cold killer, kind of ruthless, and he liked the Iceman from that guy who was, I've forgotten his name now, but it came from that.
Yeah, from Stone Cold. That's awesome. That is awesome history. So I want to kind of hit the rewind button and go back to WCW, and you came into WCW with Steve after that whole angle. And what was your time like in WCW? What were your impressions of some of the folks there?
Well, I never actually, once again, like in the world of sport, I never actually pursued a job in wrestling ever. Because remember, Chris asked me to come and do this ex-wife angle, and basically when Steve went to Memphis, I would fly into Memphis and see him, but I was very much still running my business. I did not see his start in WCW, they put him with another girl called Veronica, who I never met or never saw her work. But what happened was Steve would stay at my house, and one day he was out, and Magnum Terry Allen, who was working with Dusty in the office, called the house for Steve. And I got chatting to him. He's like, where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. What do you do? And I just casually mentioned, well, I did work with Steve in World Class. And he's really, can we get some tapes? And I said, okay. But I didn't even know he had a girl already with him. And apparently, I found out a lot later, they didn't think they had good chemistry together. But and she was kind of cute, like a sweet, maybe not as much as a heel that they wanted. But I don't know, because I never saw any of her work. But Magnum then asked me to meet Dusty, and then they brought me in to WCW. But I'll be honest with you, I was really impressed, like, when I first got there, because it was obviously a real classy promotion and, the production and everything. But I actually missed Chris's direction, because he directed me on everything. You'll say this, you'll do that. So when I got there, I was a bit lost without Chris. And I remember Chris saying, not a problem, because we'll see if we can do a crossover angle from World Class to WCW. And I said, oh, that's so cool. I'd love that. But you see, because of that grudge that Steve had against Chris, I was there when Dusty came up and he said, oh, bring in Chris Adams. And Steve said, no, that's not happening. He didn't want to work with Chris because he was still upset with him. So that didn't happen. But I got along with Missy Hyatt.
Wait. So Jeanie, just over that one booking thing, there wasn't more to it than that?
Yeah.
It seems like he holds a big grudge, because that seems kind of like a trivial thing.
Well, he never said only that to me, but I think he was very, very, very angry, because not only did Chris not pay him, he hung the phone up on him and said, don't talk to me like that. You might think you're a hot football player, but no one said you're a good wrestler. I mean, Chris gave it
Well,
to
he
him,
was also his coach, and any of us that have had coaches, and I've had a lot of really tough coaches, especially like wrestling coaches,
Yeah.
Wrestling, your coaches are going to tear you down. They're going to rip you apart and tear you down, and that's part of what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes it, and I've done that to people I've coached. I'm not going to say I haven't. I'm going to rip somebody apart and tear them down and make them tougher.
Yeah. Well, Steve did say that he loved working with Chris, because Chris would really sell and really put him over and everything.
Yeah.
And he said some of his best matches were with Chris, but there was a personal thing going on between him and Chris, and they just did not get along.
It was. I think it was more an ego. I think it was more like an ego thing. And what's the age difference between those two?
It would have been, it's only a couple of years, I think.
And you say that, but it's like...
Oh, no, it was more than that.
It's probably not that much, really.
Actually, about 8 years.
Oh, so 8 years, okay. So, but you think about it, you got one guy who has, like with Chris Adams, he's done a lot, but he probably wants to do more. And if you're going to pass the baton to somebody, the person you pass the baton to should really put you over. And I think, I'd say, Steve didn't really do that.
Yeah, that's true. There was something probably a little deeper there, but I know that paycheck was, a really big deal to Steve. But
absolutely.
So basically, I settled in okay with WCW though, and I look back and it was a fantastic experience, because I got pregnant, and I had to stop working.
So you and Steve had now explain, like, if you don't mind, like, your children, with Steve? Do you have just one child with Steve?
No, I have two.
And what are their ages? And what are their ages? If you don't mind, like this, Steve. Steve? Does he have a relationship with them, or what's that all about?
Well, I've written extensively about it in my book.
Yeah, absolutely. But
a lot of things went wrong with you know, obviously I had problems, and I came back to the UK, and I've put a lot of the reasons why I did that was because he wasn't seeing them, and I think that had a lot to do with Deborah, like Michael as well.
Yeah.
And I sat around for a couple of years because basically after Steve and I got a divorce, he and I was not well. I was an addict at this point. And Steve got a Texas order saying that I can't actually leave the state of Texas for more than 3 months with the girls, which I signed because, in all fairness, I did not want the girls to not see their dad. So even though I could have moved to Florida or New York or wherever, I thought, well, I will sign this and stay in Texas so that the girls can see their dad, even though technically I wasn't well enough to know what I was signing. And then Deborah was already on the scene, and then I was sort of sitting about 20 minutes down the road, living about 20 minutes down the road. And I think I saw Steve twice in a year. So, you know, I went a couple of years waiting for Steve and Deborah to sort of have the girls from me, but Deborah kept hanging the phone up, and eventually Steve did call me, and he said, well, come to a Fort Worth show and bring the girls, and they made all these signs, you know, like they hold up at the matches, and and about an hour or two before the show, he phoned me up and he said, actually don't come because Deborah's not happy. And I went, I don't know how you could do that to me because they've made signs and you're going to make me the hill with the girls. I'm going to bring them to the show, but I don't have to talk to you. I'll just take them home and say you had an injury or whatever.
Yeah.
But I saw Paul Heyman was there, and he goes, hey, Jeanie, come on back. So I'm thinking in my mind, okay, so Steve does want to see the girls. He's changed his mind because Paul Heyman said, come on back. And Deborah comes charging towards me, and, you know, she's really angry. And I just remember saying to her, do you have a problem? My daughter seeing their dad. And she just got right in my face, yes, like that. And I think I went home that night, and Steve actually did call me and apologize, and he said he had to get a ride with Hannah because Deborah actually took the car based on the fact that I showed up with the kids. And so I kind of was thinking, this is never going to work. I'm sitting in Texas under an order, you know, and he can't see his daughters because she's insecure about me. So I was really unwell as well. So I came back to the UK, and then unfortunately the relationship between Steve and the girls wasn't, you know, too good.
I'm gonna ask you about this, and so I was dating Deborah back in 2011, 2012, and I heard so many horror stories, and I always take everything, you know, with a grain of salt, because there's her side, there's his side, and then there's the actual truth.
Yeah.
And Deborah kind of wigged out on me because I had a guy, Doug Ames, who did the original Surreal Life. He was a producer of the original Surreal Life. He did the book with Jose Canseco. He's been, you know, done a number of projects, and he was going to work with us on doing her book. And she met with him, and then she was kind of accusatory of his behavior. I don't want to get into that too much. And then she just blew me off after that. So I think there might be a little something going on there, you know, stability and so forth.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, you know, too much. But what is your take? What is your take on her, you know, charges against Steve, which not a lot of people talk about.
I didn't see all that charges. I think she was a rebound, I think. And I think, she just didn't like ever being alone, and she was with him. He would tell me that she didn't, if he went to the gym, she'd go to the gym. If he went to the shop. So he never really, could ever get any time alone. I think she was insecure because, I was a person that he didn't actually want to divorce me.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the problem is that, my addiction and all the stuff that was happening. And I think I was a bit of a threat to her. And I mean that in a nice way, so I can understand that she was insecure.
I don't think she's a bad person, but I think you got to kind of you got to kind of peel back the layers when you talk about these things, But
if you think about it, she probably should have thought this out, that if she was going to be with him, he had 2 young daughters, and if you're going to marry someone, you're going to have to take on the fact that they do have kids.
I'll tell you right now, Jeanie, it's usually the opposite, because I have a teenage daughter, and any women I'm with are normally like, they want to know my relationship with my daughter. They want to ask all those questions. Oh, how's your daughter? How's your daughter? This or that. It's kind of strange to say, we don't want you to talk to your daughter. It's kind of like the opposite of what you'd expect.
Yeah, I know they argued all the time, and but I wasn't there, so I don't like to comment, because I have spoke to Deborah since, and she did apologize for the words back then, and I don't know, because I technically wasn't there to see what was happening or talking to them, so I don't know what the charges and all that.
She's a nice lady, and you are a sweetheart. You are a great lady, and I want to get Brian in here, my producer, to ask some questions. But before I do, I want to tell you something else I had talked about. I'm doing a book. I've been working for the last year and a half, and we're about to wrap this up, with Stephanie Bellers, who was Gorgeous George, in WCW, also big in the punk rock world.
Yeah.
We're about to wrap that up. What are your friendship and your impressions of Stephanie?
Well, I haven't actually met her, but I've spoke to her quite a lot, and I think her book would be awesome, because she's seen a lot of the wrestling industry, but more so the music industry. I think she's a real sweet girl, and I'd really love to see her have a successful book.
Yeah,
she's very beautiful.
Absolutely, she's a beautiful woman, and it's a roller coaster ride. Yeah, and so are you. You're an extremely, extremely beautiful woman, and I would say that as I look at this book, Through the Shattered Glass, by Jeanie Clarke, with Bradley Craig and Neil Cameron, forward by Kevin Von Erich, and introduction by Missy Hyatt. This is an awesome book, and I want to encourage people. Where can they go to buy this book?
You could get the book at Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk, or if you contact me via Facebook, I will personally sign the book and mail it to anybody who wants it themselves. And I want to say, while I'm on the line, if any fans are listening, thank you so much for the support, because when I came out of rehab, I was at an all-time low, and they were so supportive, and for the reviews, because technically I wrote the book as a form of therapy, or to be something I could get closure on. So I didn't expect anybody to read it, and not only that, but I've got about nearly 50 5-star reviews. So I I'm so grateful to the fans for the support of purchasing my book, and I just was so amazed that the love that I received from the fans. And
well, I can tell you that we at Arena Sports Network and the King's Court, we have a ton of love for you, and you're a sweet and beautiful woman. And you mentioned your addiction. It was more like with pills?
Well, it started off with the pills that you see around the industry, the Xanax and the Vicodin and the Somas, and mine actually went on, progressed, and I've written extensively about how my book was to make amends with my daughters, to say sorry, to own up to my own shortcomings, not to hit on anybody. It's not a hit piece on Chris or Steve. It's just my story, and how I actually am so lucky to have survived, because, I went through a couple of suicide attempts in the really dark days, and I had ambulances, I was in and out of hospital, I had to be resuscitated. So I'm here to tell the story that I hope too that other people can learn about addiction, and if they've got people that, like loved ones who are addicts, I think it can be a bit educational on addiction, and actually the hope that it could. We did a
nearly 2-hour show, Jeanie, with the Patriot Del Wilkes.
I'm so grateful. Thank you.
With the Patriot Del Wilkes, who talked about his pill addiction. Did you know the Patriot when you were in WCW?
No,
because
I didn't. No.
Well, he came off of a great college football career, and then went into WCW in the mid to late 90s, and WWF as well. He's WWF for a while, but his pill addiction, and it was ironic because I had heard him. He's been a guest twice on Steve Austin, Stone Cold Steve Austin's show, and that's where we booked it. We kind of contacted him and booked him, hearing him on there, and we had about 2 hours with him talking about his own pill addiction, which was pretty powerful stuff. Pretty powerful stuff. So absolutely. Now I'm going to throw some names at you before I bring Brian on the line here. Some folks that you interacted with in the world of professional wrestling, and I want to hear your thoughts on these folks. The first one is Percy Pringle.
I loved Percy, and I carried on a relationship with him right up until his death. We talked on the phone all the time, and he was someone who gave me a lot of support. He acted as my manager. He kind of got involved in the angle with Chris Von Erich. It was me and Stephen, Percy and Tony, Chris and Chris Von Erich, and we all kind of
you mentioned Chris Von Erich. What are your memories of Chris Von Erich?
I thought he was just really sad. He had jumped in my car once and he got in trouble for that because, we were working the angle, and he just seemed really sad, and I was just gutted when I heard the news. Very, very sad. But I liked him a lot.
What about Gary Hart?
I didn't get to work with Gary, but Tony and I would often go round to his apartment, and I just thought he was really smart. He knew his stuff and very kind. I have really good memories of Gary as well.
Now you mentioned Tony, and that was Chris Adams' wife, and you two were friends, right? And what are your thoughts of her? You two were good friends.
We were very, very, very close, and I talked to her continually up until her death, and I could not believe that she was actually doing so well. She got in a car accident, was having a heroin problem, and oxycodone or something, and she lost custody of her daughter. So towards the end, she had lost her daughter to her husband because of her addiction. And she's another person, you know, she was very, very, very much very beautiful again and just had everything to live for. And I feel so bad that a lot of these people that I knew have died of addiction, and that's another reason I wanted to write my book, because they're gone and I'm here, and I should be gone. There's no doubt. I'm very, very lucky to have survived it.
Do you think that and this is something I don't know if you've ever been asked, because if you look at WCCW and the history of addiction and deaths affiliated with that promotion, you know, you start with the Von Erichs and you go down the line. So many folks that passed away from WCCW. Do you think that your pill addiction began there, and do you think it was a consequence of working for that promotion?
No, mine started way later. I didn't have problem then at all. Mine actually started after after Steve and I moved back to Texas after the birth of my third child. So I didn't actually have addiction problems in that promotion.
And have you seen any of the biographies that were done on that promotion?
I saw one with Kevin Von Erich called Legends.
Legends of WCCW.
It was really eerie. Yeah, it was so eerie because he was walking through, and the memories, I could almost hear the crowds. You know, when it was spooky, kind of haunting. And I remembered Kerry, and I remembered Chris, and so many of the guys that have passed away, and I just kind of got goosebumps. And
that's a real horror movie.
Kevin is quite
that's
a
like
strong
The Last
person,
Man Standing.
Yeah, and he was so kind to do the forward for my book. He wrote 5 pages forward for my book. I contacted him, I phoned him up, and he said, "How can I help you?" And
let's throw that out as the next name, Kevin Von Erich.
I just think he's super kind, strong person. I didn't get to work with him, but I knew him via Chris, and I was so grateful to him to, you know, actually me phoning out the blue and telling him about my book. You know, it's mainly a book I wrote after rehab. It wasn't a book to write about wrestling, actually. It was a book to say, here's my life, I'm alive, and I shouldn't be. And I've talked to Kevin on the phone, and he just wrote that for me, and I just was so grateful to him.
Well,
to do that. So
one of the, you know, as a fan in the 80s of World Class, the guy that I really was the biggest fan of that used to come in there or not was Michael P.S. Hayes, you know, and the Fabulous Freebirds. Any memories of them?
No, because they'd already left when I got there. So
okay, that's why I figured they might have, because it all depends on years and times, you know, for that promotion. The last one that I want to close out with before I bring Brian on the line is Chris Adams' longtime tag team partner, and I still remember some of the vignettes of them out at the bars together. That was great stuff, and I mean that was vintage 1980s. That was the 1980s. Gino Hernandez. Well,
I write extensively about Gino. Good-looking guy, so much fun, and just a bigger-than-life personality, and it's just devastated me. I could not even think straight for about 6 months after he died, because I could not believe, you know, he was gone. And I had to actually move out of my apartment. I was so devastated. I write quite a lot about Gino, and even today, if I see a picture, it just brings tears to my eyes. I'm absolutely devastated that he died.
I mean, God, how big of a star, you talk about, you look at if you had that crystal ball, if he had stuck around, and you go into the 90s and you go into the Attitude Era, how big of a star would Gino Hernandez have been? I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah. It's great on the mic. And I remember going to his funeral in Houston, and he used to like Dom Perignon, the champagne. And I remember they cracked open this Dom Perignon at his funeral, and I had a couple of glasses of that, and I could not stop crying for days after, just driving back to Dallas from Houston. And I had to walk past his apartment. Don't forget, I lived next door, and every day I would see that apartment, and he was gone. And it was just one of the times in my life that was just horrible, just so sad.
And any of us who were fans and remember the Texas wrestling in the 80s were, when we watched those documentaries, and those documentaries, the ironic part is those documentaries came out 10, 15 years ago, on WCCW in all the deaths. So that's how many years ago it's been since they've all happened. It's horrible. It's heart-wrenching. Now, before we go, and I have a little surprise at the end of this, and Brian doesn't even know what the surprise is. I'm going to sing to you. I'm going to sing to you, Jeanie. But before I sing to you, I want to get the golden voice of Chicago, Brian Snow, on the line here. And Brian, see if you have any questions for Jeanie. Brian, are you there?
I am right here, my
Chicago,
friend.
Brian Snow.
Jeanie,
Hi.
an absolute pleasure to hear your story, and it's so awesome to have you basically bare your soul for us. And I listened to.
Well, thank you, because I'm grateful.
We're grateful for you. My only question is, how did you finally kick the addiction? How did you finally get rid of it?
Well, my daughters came to my rescue on Christmas Day when they called a rehab, and I went to rehab. My daughters, unfortunately, and I am very guilty, feeling quite ashamed, but I'm being honest, that not only does addiction really hurt the addict, but everybody around them. And my daughters were the ones who came to my rescue. God bless them. I love them so much.
That is great. That is great.
I do write about the rehab and my daughters and everything that went on in my book. Obviously, it's a very long story that we had the
And once again, I'm looking at this book, Through the Shattered Glass, Jeanie Clarke with Bradley Craig and Neil Cameron. You can get it on Amazon. There's a foreword by Kevin Von Erich. There's an introduction by the great legendary valet Missy Hyatt. And every once in a while, we always close with a song, but every once in a while there's a guest that's so incredibly beautiful and so special. And I say every once in a while because it's never happened until tonight, that I need to sing to this guest, because we always close off with a song. But Brian,
yes, sir.
And I say to you, gorgeous Jeanie, tonight I'm going to serenade you. And I've got a match coming up in Kentucky on December the 3rd, and rumor has it that it's going to be my retirement match against the human horror movie Adam Newsom, one of my rivals in the world of MMA, and we brought that to the squared circle, to the world of professional wrestling. And I'm going to dispose of him. I'm going to destroy him. That's that's neither here nor there. Nobody's even paying attention to that because they know that he's done. But I'm going there into the mountains of Kentucky, and I want to sing to you right now, Jeanie. I want to sing to you my song as I ride through from South Kakalaki to Kentucky, there's a state I passed through, and I'm going to mention it in this song right now. I used to spend my nights out in a ballroom. Liquor was the only love I'd known. But you rescued me for reaching for the bottom. And you brought me back from being too far gone. I'm as smooth as Tennessee whiskey, and you're as sweet as strawberry wine, and you're as warm as a glass of brandy, and I stay stoned on your love all the time. Yeah! Jeanie, Clarke, everybody! Thank you for tuning in to the King's Court.